With journeys, it has always been the same challenge, right? Which is physical and digital. So I think historically, our customers and whatever applications they use of ours have done a good job of connecting the dots between digital experience. But,
Hmm.
our customers, the incumbent institutions in financial services, offer physical locations and call centers, and now will offer virtual experiences in the future. And it's all about connecting those dots.
It's time for CX education. Welcome to the podcast for enterprise CX professionals, the people who want to connect with customers on their own terms, before, during, and after a purchase is made. In each episode, you'll learn how to create experiences your customers love. Ready? Here we go.
I'm Heather Scher. I am with Cinch, and we are doing a series of our podcast on customer experience and helping educate around customer experience. And today we have Chris with Adobe with us. He is in strategy, but I'm going to get you to introduce yourself. And really excited to hear a little bit about what you've been doing.
Thanks, Heather. Looking forward to the conversation. Christopher Young. I am the Director of Industry Strategy and Marketing for Financial Services at Adobe. So I
Great.
focus more on their digital experience enterprise set of solutions. And, my role is in my role, I have a lot of conversations with our financial services customers that range from banks to insurers to management firms. And I'm hoping to shed some light on some of those discussions in our talk today.
So, how did you actually get into this specific area as a part of Adobe and where you work?
Yeah.
How did you find yourself in the financial area?
So as you could assume, I started out my career in advertising and marketing. So you could assume I never kind of set out to be a financial services specialist in my career. So as I said, I started in traditional advertising. I covered Chase, the retail business. I moved to direct
Okay.
response. So like more like direct mail and, direct calls to action for the Trace credit card division. I moved to digital for Bank One, went back to the client side advertising, back to Chase, then product and customer marketing for E-Trade, and then finally to Adobe, a software company as their financial services lead. So like starting from that point to Chase, I was able to parlay my financial services experience, each of those moves to progress and actually do something new. So whereas I didn't have a lot of direct response experience, I did have financial service experience, and that helped me get that
Mm.
role. Same with digital. And of course, obviously same with Adobe. Because as I said, part of what I do is to leverage my experience that I built over time and translate that to our applications, apply to these various sub industries within financial services, and use terms and use cases that help drive business impact and then outcomes for their end customers.
So, large financial banking, which is I'm assuming has to market and does a lot of very different things when it comes to advertising, marketing, customer engagement compared to, let's say, other industries like e-commerce or retail, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think this may or may not be different, but a lot of these financial institutions are organized by the different businesses that they offer. So the mortgage division, the credit card division, the branch and deposit division, each of these functions within the institution has their kind of own profit and loss numbers, their own P&Ls. They've got numbers to hit. And that's kind of the challenge, right? When you try to get into a customer centric and personalization type scenario, there you have these different business units maybe pulling you in different directions to meet those specific financial goals that they have. So yeah,
Okay.
these different business units like operate, just as you'd expect. They have to advertise, they have to acquire, they have to retain. The reality is in many cases that individual is shared between those same divisions.
So help us understand, and this is not about trying to buy anyone's product necessarily, right? So the focus here today is helping understand how you have seen or been able to help some of these financial industry
Yeah.
customers with their customer
Yeah.
experience. And, a lot has changed in the last few years with digital engagement and of course the pandemic and all of that. So help us all understand that a little bit more.
Definitely. I think the best way to start is the problems that our financial services customers are trying to solve for. And that
Okay.
is this concept of personalization, but scale. right? So that's meeting that expectation that any information, product or service is available to that individual consumer in context,
Okay.
in their moment of need, and that it's unique to them. So, that's going to require it's going to require an experience that is immediate, contextual, intelligent, valuable, and of course, because it's a regulated industry, private and secure. So,
Mm-hmm.
historically, like we said, right place, right time. I mean, this in and of itself is hard
Yeah.
for one person for all the reasons that, anybody listening to this in the industry would understand, right? The deep silos that you have, the separately managed channels, maybe the incentives are different between different groups, the legacy technology that you're dealing with. But our customers have to do this in the scale of millions, like every day,
Mm-hmm.
simultaneously, at all hours of the day. And each of those millions of individuals could be not only in a different journey, but a different stage of the same journey. So the focus has to be on context of where that individual is in order to progress them to that desired outcome. So
Okay.
at Adobe, the way that we look at things in like the simplest terms possible is an inextricable connection between three things: data, content, and journeys. So when we talk about data, it's about like consistent collection of data. So there's a common understanding of what's being captured, not just like how a website or call center is performing with the analysis of the journey. We are looking to unify data to a single profile, but the most important part of that profile is activated. So, there might be exercises around unifying data and bringing it together, but if you can't use it, is not valuable, especially for us, like an
Okay.
experience purposes, right? So
Mm-hmm.
content, you could assume if I'm trying to scale interactions that are meaningful to millions of people, I'm going to need a lot of content. So I have to create content in high volumes. We're thinking about distribution, digital asset management, but also kind of the workflows that allow these things to happen, right? Allow this like a bill to become a law for anybody that watched Schoolhouse Rocks. I just completely dated my podcast, but let's move on to that. So then also like journeys, right? And this is exactly where data, your understanding of the individual and content meet, right? So that's the orchestration across these
Mm-hmm.
different channels. And then you have to make decisions at points of interaction. So Heather, if you show up at the website, you may qualify for different messages. It could be your birthday. You could have been shopping for mortgages, or you may have lost your or had your credit card lost or stolen. Those are three distinct messages, and it's important you kind of get those right and in the right order. But if I lost my card and I wish you happy birthday, thanks. But can I get to this other thing that's more pressing as an example? So that's the kind of, I've given you a lot there, but that's kind of the way that we're thinking about.
Yeah, no, that actually just makes me just like digress a little bit. It makes me laugh because I would say 2 cars ago, I am literally getting the same mailers if I wanna trade in that car. And, it's such bad experience, right? Because I'm still getting this mailer. Like last night I got a mailer and I hadn't owned this car in years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Why are you sending me information about this car that I haven't had in years?" Like,
Yes. And
because their data is so outdated on me, right? Like,
totally. And there are a couple thoughts I have, like really going to frustrate the customer. Yeah. Yes. You're expressing that frustration, but on the other hand, there's this term that I've used in the past of like the silent unsubscription. So
oh, yeah.
they may not, vocalize their dissatisfaction, but they'll just tune you out. Like they recognize that they don't really understand you, or that mail comes in, just throw it out. That email comes in, you don't open
Exactly,
it.
yeah.
Like you have a message on the website, you bypass it and log in. Like that's kind of the way that you'll operate.
Right, right. Yeah. And I'm just going to ask you an additional question because when you were just talking about the 3 categories, data, content, and
Yep.
journeys, you mentioned around data and content, you mentioned you have to orchestrate these things on different channels.
Yes.
And I guess that's where digital comes in. Could you just share a little bit about what you mean on that?
Yeah. What we mean is like, there are headwinds in all of these areas, right? So data is, the eventual deprecation of the third party cookie whenever that goes away, right? The shift to durable identifiers. and content. We're dealing more of like hybrid remote teams and how they collaborate if they're not in the same location. But with journeys, it has always been the same challenge, right? Which is physical and digital. So I think historically, our customers and whatever applications they use of ours have done a good job of connecting the dots between digital experience. But,
Mhm.
our customers, the incumbent institutions in financial services, offer physical locations and call centers, and now will offer virtual experiences in the future. And it's all about connecting those dots. So the idea is that we have customers that have successfully taken branch interactions, understood them, and then changed the subsequent digital interaction based on an actual interaction at physical location. The ability for a call center representative to see events that took place, Heather, what you were doing, the key things you were doing before you picked up the phone and called, right? That way you don't have to start over every time. This is why I'm calling, right? I know it's Heather. And I see that I see that you've timed out of your authentication. Let me help you retrieve your lost or stolen password. Hopefully you're not calling for a lost or stolen password because you can do that online. But you get the point, right? It's like I
Yeah,
understand
yeah, it's
and
a
I
huge
can,
benefit. Yeah.
resolve the problem faster because I have that context from the digital interactions that preceded it. That's kind of so now, if you really can extend to, offline locations, call centers, web, mobile, email, paid media, then you have to start orchestrating those channels together, right? Because I said before, historically, like campaigns in this sort of marketing is consistency. So I'm going to send you the same message everywhere you go. It's more than that, right? It's progression, right? Like I've sent you this message before, and now you're at a different place of the journey. So I need to say something different, or I understand what you're trying
Yeah.
to accomplish and I'm going to help you do it. That's far different than consistent messaging.
If you could share something with us that's relative to how you've seen the financial industry adapt and change with the changing times. Like, I just, we're in mobile messaging
Yeah.
and we've seen a lot with the pandemic and we've seen a lot of, hey, we don't want mail anymore. We want this but how have you seen, since you've been doing all this work, how have you seen that whole industry start really changing? And like,
Yeah.
what do you think their main direction of change has had to pivot
Yeah.
to?
So I'll give you a quick perspective on the consumer, but then I'll really focus more on the customers that I work with. I think that, you had mentioned the pandemic before, and I think generally speaking, it has opened up opportunities for consumers to experiment for whatever reason, like limited access to physical locations, and then also cost, right? So if, and there could be continue to be issues with people's personal finances, depending on what happens with the
Mhm.
economy, where they're going to be price sensitive. So that kind of opens the door for digital entrants. You have a high number of people trying new ways to pay for things. You have people that are trying financial brands that they previously weren't using a year before. And there was a stat that I saw that it said about basically an important classification for a bank is there to be the consumer's primary financial institution. So this is my
Hmm.
primary bank. Of the people surveyed, half said that their current bank is their primary financial institution. So really the key thing for financial services is loyalty. And loyalty has been put
Okay.
at risk, right? With a lot of everything, the pandemic, digital entrance, all of these things. So that's put a lot of pressure on our financial services customers to really get far deeper insights as to what's happening with their consumers. There was like a huge change in journeys. Like they were discovering new ways of people interacting with them they previously hadn't before. And they had very limited insight as to what these, individuals were trying to accomplish. But let me hit the high notes in terms of like the changes that I've seen with our customers, right? There's a convergence of digital priorities. So let's go back to data and content for a second. So when I started originally, the wealth and asset management industry, they're content marketers. So we lead, or they would lead with insights and market commentary and thought leadership. That's the way they would distinguish their brands. So they're constantly focused on like how do I take this content, produce it, banks were all about measurement and optimization. They're different. They had a lot of people that would go to their digital channels, prospects, customers, and they would do that frequently to research or transact. And now, it's converged, right? So you're saying asset management companies get really focused on data and focused on like customer data platforms and precision in segments, between institutional clients and, intermediaries. And the banks realize like, we can't just be soliciting offers constantly. We've got to engage our customers, educate. So it's really like the industry, regardless of where they started in that journey, whether it was data, content, journeys, they're all finding themselves in the same place where they all need to be proficient in all three of those areas. Skill sets are changing, right? The people that I work with are getting more technical. They're focused on analysis, measurement, and optimization. And I think marketing has become like a real mix of art and science because it's not just direct response or pure brand, right? A digital experience is a combination of the two, you know? So I would say experience is the new brand as an example. So if that's the case, and then the last thing I'll say is, if marketing is more tech enabled, then the partnerships with technology have increased significantly. You probably see the same thing with your customers. So years ago, I worked, when I was at E-Trade, I had, I'd say pretty frequent conversations with technologists, but they were really associated with really specific project, web related, offer related. Today, it has to be daily. They're marketing IT leaders. There are MarTech functions that are designed to bridge the gap between IT and business users. All of our technologies is an example. So, that relationship is become super important, as everyone knows, but that tight alignment is what's going to allow you to be successful.
And this is obviously no earth shattering. This is probably most of what people would know already, but it just seems like expectations are so different as the generations are going
Yep.
by or as the years go by. The new younger audiences and how they were born and kind of raised into a digital world. They don't know when there was anything different. So if you're not staying on top of that game and what they do and how they think and how they communicate, it's very difficult, I think, to probably get that loyalty. So again, I think each vertical or each industry has to do that differently because, like you mentioned, financial industry has to be conservative and very secure, and their brand is important for that reason. So you can't just be a fly by night organization that's in finance that you think you're going to get a ton of business. So I feel like that's changed because the demand and the expectation has even risen differently for what they're, how they're looking for that information or how they're looking to consume, right?
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of pressure there too. And maybe not for like the giants in the industry, but we work with companies that run the gamut of size. And there are smaller institutions, could be regional banks, could be credit unions, could be smaller insurance carriers, small, wealth management or asset management firms. But this concept of younger generations, it could be existential because they're looking at their customer base and they're seeing that people that are coming in are the same age as their most profitable customers who are also much, much older. And they're not getting their fair share of younger customers who they need to develop into their ideal customer of the future. And that's the problem. You're going to run out of runway at some point.
So you're saying they're already there.
Yeah. I mean, no, I'm saying that,
Some of them.
we have several companies that are that are investing in the future, right? So you might have these, Gen Z customers that may not seem profitable today. I wasn't a profitable customer for the first bank that I, worked with. But let me phrase it this way. Let's look at it this way. And I know things might have changed, but let's try. So I've been with my bank, let's call it 20 years. 20 years, right? So think about that, right? And let's just say I'm a type of customer that my bank is interested in acquiring and keeping and retaining. They acquired me 20 years ago when I was probably the age of some of these younger generation that they're not getting their fair share of now. That's the problem, right? Is because if somebody else establishes this relationship, that they could cement that in the future and for a longer period of
Got
time.
it.
But again, I'm one of the older generation. Who knows, right? These younger generations could, move around accounts, have multiple, et cetera. But typically not, right? Like typically the one, like how many banks do you work with? For example, how many banks,
Let me
who's your
see.
bank and
Probably
how long
two
have
main
you,
ones. Yeah.
and how long have you had that?
That's funny. I'm kind of more like you. I've had my primary bank for years and years and years and years. And it's just comfortable that
Yeah.
way. Right. Like, and I know they've tried to sell me other products. They've had different divisions, things like that. They've personalized it. And, I have a couple of other places for
Yep.
savings, but I see them as my primary bank. And I don't see myself moving anytime soon. Like they would have to do a lot for me to move.
That's why younger generations are so important now. And, there's
Yeah.
some studies that we have, and we can talk about some of them, but really was up there for banks in particular was modernizing experiences to attract younger consumers. And this is why, right? They look at the tenure of their customers. They look when agent to acquire these customers. Got to be earlier because at this point, what I'm a customer of a specific bank. What is another bank going to tell me at this point? It's
Right.
just, I don't know.
And actually that really brings up a really good point right back to some of the stuff that you were saying earlier about how do you kind of hone into the proper data, contextualizing that data and the content of what you have, building journeys around that early. And that's, a first perception thing. And that's makes sense that it's got to be very quick and very, very digital.
Let me introduce an entirely different concept.
Yeah.
This idea, this term is common used in financial services, which is moments that matter, right? There are specific moments that are really important to you, right? It could be buying that first home. It could be getting that first credit card. It could be getting that student loan, whatever it could be getting virtual replacement card when you overseas traveling and what there are those moments, right? And you have to comb through that data for those insights to be there in those moments, because that's what's going to cement a relationship for a lifetime. So that's
Yeah.
may not be the day to day, but when it really counts, that's when you got to be there.
And that makes a lot of sense. I've been on a lot of those receiving ends. Been robbed a couple times overseas.
Man,
Freaked out.
no.
So didn't know it right away, but I did get calls.
Yes.
I did get calls from my financial
Yes.
institutions.
Yeah.
And that's how I figured out, oh, there's no wallet in my bag. Okay. So I was able to kind of handle it from where I was, which was great. And that was kind of that peace of mind being in, hey, I've got a good financial industry, bank that I deal with, kind of a thing. So you've said some of this already, but and I think this is a question that's redundant really at this point, but how do you think what would you rate them? Like, how do you think, let's say in general, with the financial institutions that you deal with the most, how would you rate them? And this is hopefully if they're listening, they won't be shocked or anything.
I'm going to bypass this question altogether. I'm going to take a completely different route, right? I'm going to let the industry rate themselves. We have done a survey, our Adobe Digital Trends Report, to look at some of this. So we have about 500 global responders from the financial services industry. And one of the questions we asked them is, how would you rate your digital experience in terms of keeping up with customer expectations? So interestingly enough, financial services responders, 12% indicated that they're keeping ahead. Okay. Not
It's pretty low.
58% said they're keeping pace. That's not bad. 70% of the industry is saying we're keeping pace or staying ahead. So 30% lagging. That's not terrible, right? That's not terrible. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but I did look at retail's numbers. So the retail industry said 30% are keeping ahead. So 12, 30, right? The keeping pace was about the same, and only 14% said they were lagging. So not bad for financial services. You have a lot more challenges in the retail industry, but clearly there's room to grow.
And that's so they probably are not negligent in realizing this. They're like, oh yeah, we know we need to
They
have a
do.
call to action here in certain areas and kind of get on
They
it.
do. And I, I feel it in my bones. So I feel like they're making progress, right? We've been on this journey with our customers for years. They make investments, progress, and, definite improvement, but there's always room for improvement. And there's just natural restrictions that the financial services industry has that holds them back in comparison to other industries like retail. Let me add another bullet point, because here's more of a call to action for the listeners in terms of areas that you can go. So the same survey indicated that the marketing executives that we interviewed, something like 90+% said that the key to future success is the agility of the marketing department. And on it clear, it's not like, applying like agile methodology, but it's really for their teams to be able to move fast, to rapidly respond to customer changing needs. So if there's pandemic, if there's some other, situation, the market's consumers are going to react very, very differently. And it's how quickly you're able to respond, right? To really deliver on those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two areas, right? So in this survey, we looked at people that were leading, as we said before, keeping ahead, and then everyone else we kind of considered mainstream. And the biggest differences were two things. One is speed. So leaders were 2 to 3 times more likely, to say they were getting insights faster. Their ability to act on those insights was faster. And also that the insights were accessible to more people in the organization. It can't be held with a small group of individuals, right? More people have access to this. They can get them faster and act on those insights faster. The second area, right? Because it isn't a technical issue, right? It isn't a technical issue. It's new ways of working that allow for better collaboration. So you work with financial services customers. I work with financial services customers. These are big, highly matrixed organizations that absolutely require higher degrees of collaboration to be effective. So these leaders were investing more in collaborative tools and workflows, and also training and upskilling digital skill sets. It's got to be how you operate, the processes, these new technologies, and the skill sets of your people in using them.
That's amazing. Okay. That's actually super valuable, because that to me is, if that was the difference, then if people know then where they need to focus, they know where they need to focus their future investments, their budgets, their hiring, their, what kind of, even all the way down to their culture of their business is going to matter, right? So, how they bring people in, how they retain their people to then, portray who they want to be and how they want to operate to the outside world.
I promise some of my future responses will be shorter, so we can.
No, this is perfect. This is great. This is great. We've talked about the fact that there is only 12% that are kind of leading the charge. 58% are keeping up, or they think they're keeping up. They're keeping up. But that goes on to my next question then. So you've kind of alluded to it by collaboration and upskilling, having more insights, having more speed, but share with us what more needs to be done to even get to this spot in general, right? In the financial industry for their customers to meet that need. What are those couple of other things that they could focus on? If I was a banking, let's say I was a small regional bank and I was a leader with that bank and I'm listening to this podcast and knew I needed to do something, but just wasn't sure what it was.
Yeah, here's where I think we need to take a step back, right? And think about the idea is that, you're going to be more customer centric. You have to think about, what does the consumer want at the end of the day? The reality is, they want to make better and smarter decisions with their money. Simple as that. And depending on an individual's financial situation, that need could be far more urgent or extremely urgent than perhaps others. So we have to think about what financial services is and does at the end of the day. And we can go back to that Adobe Digital Trends report. And I think nothing is better expressed than the response to the top organizational goal for financial services responders. And that is at 43% was to create meaningful digital interactions to improve financial health.
Hmm.
Meaningful digital interactions to improve financial health. It's important, right? Because one, if the consumer is going to do more online and over their phone, and that's where they're going to be, then the types of experiences cannot be purely transactional in nature. There's only so much a fast money transfer or a bill pay or my ability to take a picture of a check will do in terms of my financial output. So how we infuse, you know, guidance, empathy, right? If you're not meeting with someone face to face, how do you infuse some of these elements into that experience to help people make smarter decisions in life, to help them feel more confident, to help them feel reassured? Because the end game, you could say, right, in terms of these human elements that you want to add or these guided experience, the best way to think about this is how well do you know and serve your customer? How well do you know and serve? That's the case. Any experience or offer or content or solicitation is going to be in the right place.
So I'm just, I'm so sarcastic sometimes, but I'm like, you mean I shouldn't be okay with calling a 1-800 number that puts me on hold for 30 minutes at my bank when I just got my card stolen and I have to talk to someone overseas that doesn't have access to my account?
Right. Or, even worse, right? If, let's say your financial situation isn't great and you're getting solicitations for products you've been declined for. Like that's,
Oh,
like
yes.
so that gets into like
Right.
purple
Yes.
territory. So
Like, why do you keep sending me
right. And
this?
why
You
do you
don't know what yeah.
right. Or it's like, yeah. And it's not just like we can be casually brush it off because we're okay with our finance. You know what I mean? So yeah, it could get pretty serious.
Yeah, it's a whole other topic really, but it's fascinating because people don't want those kinds of mailers. They don't want that generic types of stuff. But it also would save the financial institutions so much money if they could personalize and digitalize in a much more personal
Well,
way. Because instead of blanketing everything out, they only put that effort to the people, and that might effort and that might change, right? For each story, like you said, for each journey.
yeah, I
So
mean, that's a good pivot to, how those demands are being met.
mhm.
So, okay. So Chris, you're saying how well do you know, so customers, financial health and well-being, smarter decisions with money. What are the banks doing about that? So this is where you're seeing, all of the experiences that you have and the things you're reading about, right? Virtual assistants that are AI powered, as an example, that are available in mobile devices, automated advice, robo advisors, right? That can simulate what an advisor does in terms of, allocations of investments and recommendations, but also kind of the tracking and adjustments, tons of personal financial management tools that factor in goals that you would provide. They also give you real-time alerts, keep you on track, So all of these things, are designed to help people with those smarter decisions and, those meaningful financial outcomes. And there's also a lot in terms of, they're going to continue to digitize and remove friction points, right? Financial services is full of points of friction for one reason. But you're talking about mobile and the work that you do. And I think a lot of that is centered around the mobile device, mobile wallets. If I issue a card, I'm not mailing it. It's a virtual card that's available in your wallet for you to use right away. My wife, for example, like forget the wallet doesn't matter. She uses her mobile phone and pays at point of sale. We have banks that allow you to access ATMs before you step to them with your mobile application, as an example. So, you know, those are the things, and again, we were saying before, a ton of it is mobile centric. So those are things that we're seeing in terms of like, how do you respond to this customer need and start ratcheting up the types of experience and guidance you can provide in a digital context.
Have you seen any adversity to, you mentioned like robo advice? I think that there's a lot of, so we have chat and AI chats for automation, but it's not always best for every single scenario. But have you seen financial institutions say, okay, well, we like automation and chatbots and maybe robo bot advice for certain things, but not other things, because we're seeing a growth in personalization, even with someone you want to talk to a
Yeah,
human,
I think
right?
you
Like
got
that.
that right. I think at some point, someone thought that this will replace the human advisor altogether, right? Or we'll never need a call center again. I don't know. Maybe there might be a day, right? But the reality is that it's going to be a mix, and it's going to be a mix based on the preference of the individual and the particular situation they're in, right? You might need some much higher level of financial advice that a robo advisor simply isn't designed to provide. That's where you would want the expertise of a human that could complement the whole range of experiences that you have. You might want to invest yourself and trade, buy and sell stocks. You might want to take a portion of what you have and give it to an automated or robo advisor. And then there could be another pool of money. We're also lucky, right? That goes to some, higher end financial advisor for more complex financial needs, whether it's tax related, knock on wood, maybe estate planning in the future for me, who knows? But that's the sort of the thing. It's going to be a mix. And the other thing to keep in mind, right? It's not just necessarily this person this is going to use this particular channel.
Right.
More complicated in personal investing and wealth management. It's like pools of money. Like I'm going to use this money for this purpose and invest it on my own because it's enough that I'm comfortable with in case I don't do well. But this pool of money, so I'm not going to manage that myself. I don't trust myself. I don't have the time for it. Therefore, I need to go, so it could, I myself could run the gamut of these types of experiences, depending on what I need for what pool of money and at what time.
So then, and I know we're going to be up on time in a minute here. Have you seen, without naming a bank, of course, but just the experience, have you come across and went, oh man, this is cool. This is something that I could see that, would be really great if other banks adopted this, or other financial institutions, like something that they literally are part of that 12%, right? And they're leaving that charge, and you went, oh, this is a great way to handle this.
I think there
And
are,
what is it?
yeah. Oh boy, do I want to name names?
Don't name a
Right.
name, just an
So
experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think I've got like several really good experiences with the financial institutions that I work with. The one I'll point out here is associated with an insurance company, and this is about data, right? This is about input. So I went to one insurance company, which you would say they are a leader in the space, okay? And I was trying to get home insurance for an apartment. So as I'm going through the process, they're asking, when was the building constructed? I don't know. I'll have to Google it. What is the roof constructed from? I'm like, what do you mean? What is the roof constructed from? It's a building. So I'm looking at the different options, and then I eventually failed. I said, like, it doesn't seem like this experience will allow me to apply effectively for insuring an apartment in the city. I went to an insurtech company, right? That is, they're supposed to be, highly regarded for their experiences, and they delivered because I simply typed in the address and they said, is it a condo or a co-op? Nailed it. So that's who was insuring the apartment now, right? And a lot of that, it wasn't some incredible, virtual mobile AI driven experience. Is simply understanding and being able to process customer inputs and remove unnecessary steps and truly understanding, oh, I understand that this is a apartment. So then the next thing I'm going to ask me, by the way, when the building was built, so that's the story that I've got that is very recent. Then I'm like, okay, I see the difference now.
Yeah, that is a very noticeable difference, because something that was just, again, directly related to customer experience and a poor experience, right? Like it was like pulling teeth just to provide them the information. And then you went to this other one And it sounds like, I mean, it's like they had been capturing the data all in the back end on their
Yep.
systems. So they've done all of the upfront work. So you could just put in one or two little things and they could immediately pull out
Saved me
what was
it
needed.
saved me a ton of time, gave me a high
Yeah.
degree of confidence in terms of what they were doing. And the rest of the experience was great. Like a lot of transparency. With insurance, they really give you a sense of like what it is that your coverage. It allowed you to
Mhm.
kind of adjust. Well, if you don't think you need as much flood, right? As an example, right? You can decrease that down or increase, some other aspect of it, and you can see how your premium would adjust. I thought that was a great experience too.
Yeah, I mean, it's some of these companies do really, really well, right? I mean, and they are able to pivot. I just, we know obviously we see companies getting hacked all the time from other countries or people or groups or whatever it is. So that is definitely the number one, hope is that that's secure no matter what. But you have to weave in the ease of doing business, it sounds
Yeah,
like. And some of them are doing
it's a
well.
great point, and I want to go back to another study that I saw casually. Right, that there's a huge, like the insurance example, as I said before, that the incumbent insurers, right, the ones that and see on TV, have a massive trust advantage over these smaller
Mhm.
players that are entering the scene. Okay, right, but experience to me trumped whatever recognition this other company had. It's like, whoa, these guys get it. Like eventually that's going to change if this is the distinction in the experiences that you're delivering.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, that's a great place to sort of wrap things up here. I know that we're out of time. It's actually been a great session, really valuable, I think, for end consumers that are interested to understand what's happening for them personally, and then also any of our shared customers that are financial institutions or any listening today of things they really should be thinking about. So I really appreciate your time. And any last
No,
thoughts?
Heather, I appreciated the time. I appreciate the partnership that we have between Adobe and Cinch. So
Yeah.
thanks for having us.
Oh, yes. You're welcome. Have a great day and really appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody.
That's it for this episode of CX Education. Thanks for joining us. This show is brought to you by Cinch, the technology company that helps you create mobile experiences your customers love. Did you enjoy the episode? Then make sure to subscribe to CX Education wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or visit cinch.com/podcast to get instant access to all the latest episodes.